As always, I'm starting with global commodities and energy prices. Look at that, over $90 a barrel for Brent. Well, you would have heard the news about an attack on Syria. In Syria, I believe the Iranian embassy in Syria and in Iran believes Israel is responsible. That's leading to bullish sentiments in oil markets. Of course, we've been seeing attacks on Russian refineries as well. So tensions in the Middle East are rising. Of course, Iran has threatened revenge on Israel, but has never actually ever attacked Israel. So we'll see how that pans out. That sentiment is influencing WTI, also up by 0.88%. Of course, natural gas, a whopping 1.8%. And RBLB gasoline 0.51%. Of course, OPEC is also making all sorts of movements. I'll talk about that a bit later in the program. But you can see all prices there, $90 a barrel and above. What a whooping end to the week. Let's take a look at equity markets around the world. We'll start, of course, with Nigeria. The all-share index was down by 29 basis points to end the week at 103,437.67. Look at the volume of deals there, 2.24 billion, a little over 8,000 deals on the market, with the market capitalization at the end of the week at 58.5 trillion naira. What is European market sentiment like? Well, all the major indices in Europe were down. Europe probably thinking about what's happening in the US market, with Fed being a bit hawkish about rate cuts, but all the major indices down. Manufacturing, consumer goods, retail, utilities in Europe all down. FTSE All-Share Index in London also down 81 basis points. DAX in Germany, Paris CAC 40, and IBEX 35 in Spain also down. Interesting sentiment there in Europe. Wall Street, what's happening in Wall Street? Quite the opposite in Wall Street, and there's a specific reason for that, at least in the past week, because US jobs data were quite positive, coming out at 300,000 new jobs added to payrolls for the last quarter. Look at that. Dow was up 73 basis points, S&P up 91 basis points, and NASDAQ Composite also up by 1.06%. Now, let's take a look at my top business picks for this week. And of course, I talked about US employment data. Look at that. The markets was predicting that jobs would be up about 200,000 jobs, but the actual data came out showing that 300,000 or 303,000 new jobs were added to the US market. Of course, that's a great thing. But now what that means is that bets are off about whether the Fed will actually cut rates. Markets and analysts were predicting 3 rate cuts this year by the US Fed, but they may be worried about the economy heating up again. So we'll see what happens at the next sitting of the Fed committees. In Senegal here, in our West Africa region, the new government of Bassirou Faye is looking at auditing oil, gas, and mining companies and their contracts. Of course, we have companies like Cosmos, we have Woodside, we even have a Nigerian company, Oranto Petroleum, exploring offshore Senegal. Now, Faye's government is saying it wants to audit companies. It's not saying it will revise the contracts, but due to sentiment around economic conditions in Senegal, particularly by the younger demographic, he's essentially following on his pre-election campaign to look at these contracts in Senegal. Senegal, of course, a big producer of precious and base metals like copper, nickel, zircon, phosphates, and the like. So we'll see how that evolves in the Senegalese market. Now, Zimbabwe has introduced a new currency called ZiG. That's capital Z, small I, and capital G. If you've been following Zimbabwe, you've just seen that its currency this year has tanked by about 70%. Now it's replacing its old Zimbabwean dollar with this new ZiG currency, whose price will be determined by a basket of foreign currencies and precious metals, specifically gold, held in reserves at the Zimbabwean Reserve Bank. Of course, the government is trying to boost the economy and lead to a recovery. It's been dollarized for many years, but when the currency was introduced in 2019, it still faced serious headwinds. So interesting development there in Zimbabwe. And actually, the government has said it's introducing and recalibrating its interest rates and pegging it at 20% from the previous 130%. Let's look at what's happening elsewhere around the world. OPEC keep its output quota unchanged change as oil prices, as you were seeing at the top of the show, not just near $90 a barrel, but have actually topped $90 a barrel. Now, OPEC Plus, which is OPEC plus Russia, and a few other countries are basically keeping outputs as they are. In March, Saudi and Russia decided to keep their output cuts stable, but OPEC has also told countries within the cartel that exceeded their quota that they will need to submit plans to compensate for that excess production. So oil prices there staying on a very tight rope. And finally, British Utilities, Thames Water, which supplies about 25% of the UK population, has formally issued a default notice on a £400 million bond to the market. Now, a parent company, Kemble Water Finance, which issued those bonds, says it's no longer able to service those bonds. Of course, Thames Water Utility has about $15 billion in debt, but only £400 million, sorry, £15 billion, I would say, in debt, but only £400 million being affected by that. Now, this is potentially a concern for shareholders, which includes Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, China's sovereign wealth funds, and many UK pension funds who could see their shareholder funds essentially wiped out from this. So Thames Water, they're facing a season of restructuring. Now, that's it for my business top picks for the week. I hope you enjoy that. And now let's take a look at top stories from around the world in the past week. Let's begin with a look at New York. During the week, there was actually an earthquake in the New York market, of course, Wall Street hub for New York there, which saw several buildings shaking, particularly in the New Jersey axis. And we'll be following that story quite significantly on Arise here. So New York, they're facing some headwinds really around the earthquake that shook the markets there. It was a magnitude 4.8 earthquake, actually, that struck late on Friday. Nerves were rattled, but no serious damage or injuries have been reported in the New York market. And the epicenter of the tremors, I said, was in New Jersey. It was the strongest recorded in the Northeast US in more than a decade. State officials say inspections are taking place to ensure the integrity of buildings, bridges, and other infrastructure. The European Commission has been investigating Microsoft's tying of Office and Teams since a 2020 complaint by Salesforce-owned competing workspace messaging app Slack. Teams, which was added to Office 365 in 2017 for free, subsequently replaced Skype for Business and became popular during the pandemic, due in part to its video conferencing. Rivals, however, said packaging the products together gives Microsoft an unfair advantage. The company started selling the two products separately in the EU and Switzerland on August 31 last year. But starting April 1 this year, customers can either continue with their current licensing deal, renew, update, or switch to the new offers. Car maker Tesla posted a fall in deliveries for the first time in nearly 4 years and missed Wall Street estimates, a sign that the effects of its price cuts are waning as the automaker battles rising competition and softer demand. Now, Tesla's shares have fallen nearly 30% in value so far this year. The world's most valuable automaker handed over about 386,000 vehicles in the 3 months to 31st March, down 20.2% from the prior quarter. It produced 433,000 vehicles during that period. Wall Street, on average, had expected Tesla to deliver 454,000 vehicles, according to 18 analysts polled by Visible Alpha. The automaker's deliveries fell 8.5% from a year ago. The last time it posted a sales fall was in the second quarter of 2020, when COVID-19 pandemic forced the automaker to shut down production. The Nigerian government has provided reasons for jerking electricity tariffs nationwide, saying that it could no longer afford to subsidize power to the tune of 2.9 trillion naira this year. The Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, on Friday gave the information at a media briefing in Abuja, where he pointed out that the increase in tariffs became imperative to enable the federal government to reduce its expenditure and plow the money into the improvement of power generation and supply in the country. Nigeria's government has revealed plans to start issuing domestic foreign currency denominated bonds from the second quarter of this year. The information was made available to Reuters by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun. In October 2023, Edun had said President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had signed executive orders to allow domestic issuance of instruments in foreign currency and also allow all cash outside the banking system to be brought into the banks. Edun said the government had not issued the bonds earlier because as it sought to first build confidence in its fiscal policy and gain the trust of citizens. Nigeria has struggled to raise revenue to fund its national budget, largely due to a decline in oil output. The exchange rate between the naira and the dollar closed at below 1,300 naira on Tuesday, marking the first trading day on the official NAFEX market after the Easter holidays. This closure below that mark is the first occurrence since January 26 of this year. On the official market, the exchange rate escalated from 891.9 on that day in January to 1,348.62 naira the following day, maintaining a closure above 1,300 naira ever since. The naira depreciated to as low as 1,615 naira on March 13, 2024. However, since the introduction of a slew of forex policies, the naira has gained over 21% on the dollar since March. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in Nigeria has passed the Student Loans Access to Higher Education Act into law. This comes after separate considerations by both the Senate and the House of Representatives of the report of the Committee on Tertiary Institutions. Speaking after he signed the bill, the president said no Nigerian, regardless of their background, will be excluded from obtaining quality education. The executive bill was signed in the presence of the leader of the National Assembly, ministers, and major stakeholders in education. This followed separate considerations by both the Senate and the House of Representatives of the Committee and the Tertiary Education Fund. The Kenyan currency was the worst performing currency in East Africa, trading at 162 shillings against the dollar at the beginning of the year. It, however, closed the quarter as the best performing East African currency, exchanging at 131 shillings to the dollar. On the headwinds that impacted the highs and lows, as well as East Africa's economic performance in the first quarter and quarter two expectations. The all-share stock index in Nairobi has surged 49% this year when measured in dollars, rebounding from a 43% plunge in 2023 when the index was trading at levels last seen in 2011. While still on Kenya, the country's coffee prices surged by 3% in the latest auction, driven by concerns of a global shortage exacerbated by heavy rains disrupting crop yields. This spike propelled farmers' overall earnings for the week to $10 million. During the week's auction, the price of the beverage soared to $245, up from $236 in the previous sale. The government of Kenya is actively advocating for coffee reforms aimed at increasing farmers' earnings by eliminating brokers along the value chain. Kenya primarily sells up to 95% of its total production to the world market, with only 5% allocated for local consumption. Well, global management consulting giant McKinsey has offered 9 months' worth of pay to hundreds of its senior staff to leave the firm and look for jobs elsewhere. In a report by The Times, McKinsey's latest attempt to reduce staff comes amid a sector-wide downturn, and the report claims that the managers at the UK offices of the consulting firm are being given 9 months to look for other jobs. Under this initiative, personnel can use this time, which is an internal phrase referring to the staff who are spending their time looking for a job rather than working on client projects. Besides paying its employees in full amounts for the next 9 months, McKinsey is also giving its managers access to resources and career coaching services. The world's biggest chip maker is working to resume operations following the massive earthquake that struck Taiwan on Wednesday. This is a welcome sign for makers of products ranging from iPhones and computers to cars and washing machines that rely on advanced semiconductors. A 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck the island's east coast on Wednesday morning, the strongest in 25 years, killing 9 and causing landslides and collapsed structures. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the leading chip maker, also known as TSMC, operates largely on the opposite side of the island, although the company said its facilities did experience some shaking. TSMC temporarily evacuated some manufacturing plants following the quake, but later said that staff were safe and had returned to their workplaces. Well, that's all we have right now.